Think Florida real estate is still booming in 2026? Not for long. Behind the palm trees, the glass condo towers, and the beach town postcards, a quieter story is spreading across the state, and it's the kind of story that doesn't show up in a sunny brochure. Inventory is building, listings are sitting longer, price cuts are becoming normal instead of embarrassing, and the cost buyers can't see in a Zillow screenshot insurance, flood coverage, taxes, association fees, and surprise assessments are now deciding deals more than granite countertops ever will. This isn't one simple crash headline. Florida's reset is a cost story, a confidence story, and in certain pockets, a survival story. Because in Florida, the purchase price is only the first number. The number that matters is the monthly total, mortgage payment, homeowners insurance, flood insurance where required, property taxes, and if you're buying a condo or living in an HOA fees and assessments that can rise fast when buildings, reserves, or repairs come due. And here's the key shift. The market doesn't have to collapse for owners to get trapped. It just has to stop rewarding optimism. When buyers believe the same home might be cheaper next month or that the carrying costs might jump at renewal, urgency dies. The frenzy turns into hesitation. Hesitation turns into leverage, and leverage turns into price discovery. Nationally, the housing market has been tilting toward buyers, with more homes selling below list and more concessions becoming common. The South stands out, and Florida shows up repeatedly in buyer-friendlier market discussions because supply has improved and buyers are pushing back on affordability. Florida isn't uniformly collapsing, and some neighborhoods will hold up better than others. But the easy era, where sellers could name a number and buyers fought over it, is fading across more of the state than most people want to admit. So today, on across.us4, we're counting down 10 Florida cities where the market is cracking wider, going into 2026. This is your briefing. What's happening, why it's happening, and what signals to watch if you live here or you're thinking about buying here. If this breakdown helps, subscribe to across.us4 and tell us in the comments which Florida city you think is most exposed right now. Now let's get on the road. The Florida reality check that most people ignore. Before we count down the cities, you need one mental model. Florida is becoming a payment market, not a price market. In a price market, people talk about the purchase price and the comps. In a payment market, buyers talk about the total monthly burn rate because that's what determines whether they can sleep at night. Two things pushed Florida hard into payment territory. One, ownership costs rose and became unpredictable. Insurance is the obvious one. Even when the pace of increases cools, premiums remain elevated and vary dramatically by zip code, roof age, elevation, wind mitigation, and claims history. Florida realtors reported average premiums rising modestly in 2025, but the larger point is that the baseline is high and buyers' no renewals can still surprise them. 2. Condos got a new financial reality. After the Surfside disaster, Florida passed major condo safety reforms, milestone inspections, and structural reserve requirements. As associations comply, many buildings are raising fees and issuing special assessments to fund reserves and repairs. That hits buyers directly because it inflates the monthly cost and adds unknown unknowns to the deal. That combination changes the psychology. When costs are unpredictable, buyers demand a discount for risk. And when buyers demand discounts, markets that relied on momentum start to crack. Now let's move on, city by city. Number 10, Fort Lauderdale. Fort Lauderdale looks like a market that should never slow down. Water, boats, luxury towers, strong branding, constant demand from people who want to live where everyone else vacations. But going into 2026, Fort Lauderdale is showing a specific kind of stress. Not just price pressure, cost pressure. Here's how it plays out in real life. A seller cuts the price, but the buyer's monthly payment barely improves because the biggest swing factors aren't the seller's decision. Their insurance, condo fees, flood coverage, and taxes. Those don't negotiate with you. They invoice you. In coastal South Florida, buyers have become underwriters. They don't just ask how close the unit is to the beach. They ask, what are building reserves? What did the last inspection uncover? Are there upcoming repairs? What's the history of special assessments? What does the insurance renewal look like? And when those answers feel uncertain, buyers don't run in. They step back. Fort Lauderdale also suffers from what I call tower competition. In certain buildings, multiple similar units can hit the market at once. When buyers see clustering, same building, same floor plan, slightly different prices, urgency disappears. They stop asking, how fast can I win? And start asking, how low will they go? That's how a market doesn't crash, but reprices. Watch the signal that matters, time. When listings sit longer, the market mood changes. Sellers who adjust early move. Sellers who stay anchored to peak pricing become stale listings, and stale listings get negotiated hard. Number 9, Cape Coral. Cape Coral sold one of Florida's most irresistible fantasies, waterfront living at scale, canals, boats, backyard water views, and the feeling you were buying a lifestyle, not just drywall. But in 2026, Cape Coral is a warning sign for what happens when a market runs too hot, too fast, and then hits higher borrowing costs and higher ownership costs at the same time. 3 pressure points are squeezing Cape Coral. 1, supply. Cape Coral built aggressively during the boom years. When supply grows faster than demand, a market doesn't usually fall off a cliff. It slows first, then it softens. Then sellers start undercutting each other, one price cut at a time, until the new price reality becomes undeniable. 2, flood and insurance math. In flood-exposed areas, insurance can feel like a second mortgage. Buyers are running what-if scenarios now. If premiums rise again next renewal, can I still afford the home? That question alone shrinks the demand because fear is a demand killer. 3, investor exit. Cape Coral attracted investors chasing relocation demand and short-term rental income. But when holding costs rise, margins disappear. And when margins disappear, investors don't patiently negotiate. They list, they cut, they move on. That creates a pattern where a neighborhood can feel normal and then suddenly feels crowded with listings. And once buyers feel they have choices, urgency dies. Cape Coral will always be beautiful. But going into 2026, beauty isn't enough when the monthly math doesn't work. Number 8, Ocala has long been marketed as Florida without the chaos. Horse country, open space, quieter living, and at least historically, prices that felt reachable. But going into 2026, Ocala faces a problem common to formerly affordable markets. It got discovered, then it got built up, then it got expensive, and now it has to cool without collapsing. Ocala's ceiling is local affordability. If wages don't rise at the same speed, housing costs rose during the boom, the market hits resistance. That resistance shows up in slow motion, longer days, on market, more negotiation, more concessions, more price cuts disguised as seller credits. And while Ocala isn't a headline beach city, It still lives inside the Florida insurance ecosystem. Statewide underwriting shifts and repricing still land on homeowners here. Ocala is the kind of market where the correction feels quiet at first. A few reductions, a few more listings, a few sellers saying, I'll just wait. But waiting can turn into a trap because when enough sellers decide to wait, inventory stacks up. And when inventory stacks up, the buyer has leverage. Ocala isn't just slowing, it's becoming a buyer decision market. That's a major shift from the frenzied years. Number 7, Tampa. Tampa was a relocation magnet. Jobs, lifestyle, water access, sports, and a housing market that felt like it only moved in one direction. But going into 2026, Tampa is showing what happens when a momentum market runs into higher payments and more supply. The behavior change is the story. In the frenzy years, buyers made fast decisions because they feared missing out. Now buyers do the opposite. They shop, they compare, they ask for concessions, they demand repairs. They walk away when the numbers don't work. And Tampa is not one market. It's multiple markets at once. Prime school zones and well-priced homes can still move. Overpriced listings and aspirational sellers are getting punished. Pockets with heavy new construction face constant competition. Then there's the investor layer. Tampa attracted investors expecting rent growth and easy demand. But when supply rises and renters push back on price, cash flow gets thin. Thin cash flow forces decisions, and forced decisions create listings. Zoom out, and Tampa starts to resemble the broader national shift toward buyers. More inventory, more negotiations, more deals below list, more concessions. The key Tampa signal to watch is not the headline median price. It's the spread. The difference between what sellers think they can get and what buyers are actually willing to pay once they calculate the full monthly total. When that spread grows, deals slow. When deals slow, cuts follow. Number 6, Jacksonville. Jacksonville doesn't always get the spotlight like Miami or Tampa, but it's been one of the biggest Florida growth stories because it offered relative affordability, more space, and a livable city feel. Going into 2026, Jacksonville is facing the same math problem as much of Florida. Higher borrowing costs, shrink buyer, qualification rising ownership costs, shrink buyer willingness. When the buyer pool narrows, inventory doesn't need to explode to create pressure. It only needs to rise enough that buyers feel they have choices because choices destroy urgency. Jacksonville also has a fragile identity issue. Affordability was part of its brand. When affordability fades, demand shifts outward. Buyers look farther from the core, choose smaller homes, or delay buying entirely. That's how pressure spreads quietly without one dramatic headline. And Jacksonville is exposed to investor behavior. If investors begin pulling back, specific neighborhoods can soften fast even if the metro looks stable at a glance. That's how the city is fine turns into my neighborhood is flooded with listings. The Jacksonville story isn't necessarily a dramatic collapse story. It's a slow shift story. More negotiations, more concessions, and more sellers realizing peak pricing is no longer the baseline. Number 5, Sarasota. Sarasota sells a lifestyle. Light sand, marinas, arts, retirees, second homes, and real estate that feels like a permanent demand machine. But luxury markets soften first. They slow first. They sit first. High-end buyers have options. They can wait. They can negotiate. They're not forced to buy on emotion and panic. Now layer on the second home reality. The carrying costs, insurance, maintenance, taxes, and if it's a condo, fees and possible assessments. Even wealthy buyers don't like burning money on unpredictability. The more the market feels uncertain, the more they pause. And when luxury buyers pause, inventory stacks up. Sarasota also faces condo-specific pressure because Florida's condo safety laws are forcing a financial reset for many associations. More reserves, more repairs, more compliance, more monthly cost. That pushes buyers to discount condos relative to single-family homes, and it forces sellers to compete. Sarasota isn't losing its appeal, but appeal doesn't prevent a correction when the buyer mood changes. Corrections happen when expectations get repriced, and Sarasota is in the repricing zone. Number 4, Port St. Lucie. Port St. Lucie was marketed as the smart Florida compromise, not as expensive as the trophy coastal names, still close enough to beaches and amenities, and full of newer communities that felt clean and simple. Going into 2026, Port St. Lucie is showing classic signs of a market that ran ahead of its fundamentals. Prices climbed faster than local incomes could comfortably support, and new construction kept feeding supply. When a market is payment sensitive, small changes in rates, taxes, or insurance create big changes in demand. Because the buyer isn't shopping based on total wealth, they're shopping based on whether the monthly payment feels survivable. A seller can cut the price, but if insurance and taxes keep the payment high, buyers still hesitate. And hesitation teaches buyers patience. Once buyers learn patience, the market stops being a race. Port St. Lucie is also vulnerable to perception shifts. If buyers start believing prices are coming down here, that becomes self-reinforcing. Buyers wait, arrow inventory builds arrow. Sellers cut, arrow, buyers wait longer. Even local real estate commentary going into 2026 has leaned toward the idea that negotiating power is shifting toward buyers in this area. The big watch item here is the new construction pipeline. When builders have inventory, they offer incentives. When builders offer incentives, resale sellers have to compete. And competing against incentives usually means cutting price or paying closing costs. Number 3, Fort Myers. Fort Myers had one of Florida's fastest boom stories: sharp appreciation, heavy investor attention, and relocation demand that made the market feel unstoppable. But going into 2026, Fort Myers is living with the after effects of storm risk and higher ownership costs. Here, insurance is not background noise, it's a defining feature. When insurance costs rise, it changes. Who can buy, how much they can pay, how long they're willing to hold if the numbers stop working. Then there's the resilience cost: roofs, windows, mitigation upgrades, and repairs buyers now expect after recent storm cycles. Even when a home looks move-in ready, buyers negotiate around risk. Add the investor layer. If short-term rental revenue softens or regulations tighten, investor confidence breaks. And when confidence breaks, listings rise. Finally, condos and HOAs matter here too. Fees are rising in many communities, and buyers are calculating total monthly cost, not just the mortgage. Condo compliance. Pressures statewide can show up as higher fees and assessments, which buyers treat like financial landmines. Fort Myers can still look active, but underneath, negotiation is harder, price cuts become common, and sellers who bought near the top discover the exit isn't as easy as the entry was. Number 2, St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg became a darling city. Arts, walkable areas, waterfront parks, and a lifestyle that pulled locals and newcomers alike. Going into 2026, St. Petersburg is facing a familiar Florida reality: higher ownership costs can cool even the most desirable places. As inventory builds and homes sit longer, sellers start competing. In a market that saw rapid appreciation, competing often means price cuts or disguised cuts like paying points, covering closing costs, or agreeing to repairs. What makes St. Pete feel different is that buyers are negotiating on risk, not just price. They want clarity on the things that can blow up later: insurance costs and renewal, risk roof age and wind mitigation condo reserves and future assessments, inspection findings and repair timelines. St. Petersburg also sits inside the coastal risk conversation. Even when a home isn't on the sand, buyers think in decades now, not just in closing dates. That mindset slows demand. And St. Petersburg has a split market effect. Updated homes in prime pockets can still move. Anything dated, overpriced, or uncertain sits. And when homes sit, the perception of weakness spreads fast. This isn't St. Pete becoming unattractive. It's St. Pete being repriced around reality. That's what corrections are. Expectations getting reset. Number 1, Lakeland sits between Tampa and Orlando, which made it feel like the perfect corridor play. Access to major metros, historically lower prices than the coasts, and fast-growing neighborhoods that absorb demand when bigger cities got too expensive. But going into 2026, Lakeland is showing the most dangerous combination a housing market can have: supply pressure, affordability strain, and momentum risk. Here's what that combination looks like. Lakeland attracted buyers who were stretching for affordability. Stretched buyers can't absorb surprise costs. Florida is full of surprise costs: insurance, taxes, repairs, fees. When stretched budgets break, demand drops fast. Lakeland also attracted investors because it looked like the value play. But value plays depend on the monthly math working. When insurance, taxes, and maintenance rise, the edge disappears. And that's why Lakeland is exposed. It's not one dramatic problem. It's multiple pressures hitting at once: affordability, holding costs, and a shift from urgency to patience. Patience is poison for a market that relied on momentum, because momentum only works when buyers believe next month will be more expensive than this month. When that belief flips, the market has to adjust. It doesn't get a vote. What this road trip really revealed: Florida is not one market. It's many markets reacting to the same statewide pressures: higher total ownership costs, insurance, stress and renewal, uncertainty, condo fee, and reserve realities driven by safety laws and inspections buyers who are no longer willing to gamble on endless appreciation. And the broader U.S. backdrop matters too. Buyers in many places are gaining leverage as inventory improves and affordability stays tight. With more concessions and more homes selling under list, especially across the South. This doesn't mean every Florida city is collapsing, but it does mean the era of easy wins is over in many places. And in fragile markets, conditions can change fast. So if you're buying in 2026, your advantage is discipline. Don't fall in love with the listing price. Underwrite the monthly payment. Stress test insurance. Read the condo docs like you're reading a contract with your future self. If you own in one of these markets, don't confuse no headlines with no risk. Watch inventory. Watch days on market. Watch how many listings are cutting. The story is always in the trend line, not the billboard. If this breakdown helped you understand what's really happening in Florida going into 2026, share this with someone watching the market. And subscribe to across.us4 so you don't miss the next deep dive. And tell us in the comments, which Florida city do you want covered next? And is your neighborhood starting to feel the pressure? Because we're not here for the fantasy. We're here for the truth after the hype.